Hello, and welcome to the AzureWell Podcast. I'm Susan Booth, and with me today is Dr. Alphonzo Monzo, a biblical naturopath doctor with experience in bioenergetics. And I think that goes right in with our subject today. We're going to be talking about brain and eye health. It's more than meets the eye. And I think you've got some really good information for us today, Dr. Monzo.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me again.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
bring lots of information for us, and I think what you've got today is right on target for what we need to hear right now.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. We're going to cover things a lot like we have in the past, but we're actually going to bring, because of the subject matter, we're going to bring a little bit of the biophysics into this and show people how different correlations exist in the body that you don't typically think of, specifically related to the brain and the eyes.
Nice.
So I guess we can get right into it. So
Yeah.
more than meets the eye. We're talking about brain and eye health here. So, the outline, of course, is what is the purpose and function of the brain and eyes? What are root causes of brain and eye issues? How about lifestyles to help improve the brain and eyes? And then we're going to get into that unique view of the brain and eyes and how there are energetic systems of the body that are related and how that ties the brain and the eyes into other organ systems. And then we're going to get into the nutrition and then what supplements may be beneficial for brain and eye health. So the first part here is the brain. So most people kind of have a concept of what is the brain. Well, you can see a picture of it there in the upper right. And most people probably know the first two or three things here. Informational processing. So in other words, the brain is receiving all kinds of information, sensory information from the environment through our five senses: sight, smell, touch, taste, hearing, and then it assembles all this information and helps us to perceive and understand things around us, right? Most people probably understand that to some degree. The second one, maybe the most commonly understood, the brain is a storage area. So we're talking memory, and people have long-term memory, short-term memory, and a lot of times it's not necessarily memory that's a problem for most people. It's the ability to recall what has been stored. So the brain has the ability to store memories, to learn, adapt, and recall those past experiences and memories. And, uh, those things are highly connected to all kinds of sensory things. So oftentimes our memories are attached to emotions or feelings or a smell or something else that was sensory that gets attached to the actual memory. And then those things can trigger us to recall the memories in the future sometimes. And then the third one I think is really common for most people is the motor control. So this is the ability for the body to have both voluntary movement and involuntary. So in other words, you're thinking about speaking and you speak. You're thinking about walking and you walk. You're thinking that you want to eat and you go and you eat. Whereas involuntary are automatic. Those are things your brain automatically is controlling and you don't have to think about it, like your heart rate and blood circulation, breathing. And this is a very good thing because for a lot of us, if we didn't have those automatic functions, we probably wouldn't be around because we would probably forget to do it. So we don't even have to think about it consciously. It just automatically, involuntarily, your body is automatically taking care of it. Now, there are other functions about the brain that sometimes people don't think about, and that is another main function of the brain is to regulate organ function. So, homeostasis, which basically means big fancy word for balance in the body, because all the organs of the body really, we list a couple here on the PowerPoint, but really all the organs in the body are connected to the brain in some fashion. And a lot of the brain, when I forget what episode it was, maybe 2 ago, we did men's and women's health. And so in that, we covered a lot of the endocrine system. And a lot of the endocrine system is in the brain, the hypothalamus and the pituitary, the pineal. And these are parts of the brain that actually make hormones and release hormones, but the brain also has neurotransmitters and it lives off of minerals and fat and amino acids. So the brain is communicating and coordinating with a lot of different organs in the body. And there's really a biofeedback approach to the body. Most organs have some type of biofeedback with the brain where the organ is functioning and then sending feedback about its function to the brain, and the brain is sending information back. And that is a feedback loop. So when something's happening and the body realizes it needs to stop, it sends a message, hey, stop doing this. And a lot of that is related to the different organs. And then another one is emotional response. And there's a whole part of the brain, we usually call it the midbrain, the limbic system right in the middle of the brain, that is controlled or controls your emotions and your feelings and reacts to stressful situations and trauma. And so that's where we get a lot of the anxiety, depression, post traumatic stress. And that system of the brain is highly related to um, good mineral content, especially copper, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And there's going to be a really interesting play on the colors we chose too. Speaking of brain and eyes, and we're going right into the eyes. And so that's actually the second one listed here under eyes, image formation, when we get into colors and perception of shapes and movements. We picked the colors really specifically for this um, presentation, really for two things. One, based on the time of season, December, and I tried to pick December colors. But also, the more I was thinking about this whole presentation, I was like, well, wow, there's really 4 cycles of energy in the body that have to do with red, blue, and green. As you can see up there, those 3 colors there, the red, blue, and green. And it's directly related to your minerals. It's directly related to the brain and the eyes. So we're going to get into that here in a couple minutes.
Yeah, 4 cycles of energy is
Yeah.
something that you're going to need to explain because I think that's going to
Yes.
be new for a lot of people.
Yeah. So when we get there, we'll cover that part.
Mhm.
And so, how about a little bit more about eyes here? So, interesting thing, and I think Susan was mentioning this. She was reading a book, but uh, most people don't realize this, but the eyes are actually an extension of the brain. So, when you really think about it, when you look at the picture of the eye here, the biggest thing about the eye is it's really a fancy lens. And most of the functioning of the eye is really taking place in the brain. So you can see the eye detects light, converts it into electrical signals, which is then, well, they call it phototransduction, but that's passed into the brain. So the light enters the eye through the cornea, and then you have the pupil and the lens, and then it's absorbed by photoreceptors, the rods and the cones and the retina. And rods and cones are what give you your color and black and white. And the way I used to remember it in school is rods are kind of, think of metal rods. So that's kind of like your black and gray. And I live in Ohio, and I don't know if anyone's ever been through Ohio before, but we have orange cones everywhere on our highways. They're always working on way too many roads at the same time, and you're going, why would you do this?
Mhm.
You know, you had to take 3 bypasses to get to one place because they decided to work on all of them at the same time. It's like, come on.
Mhm.
But you think of those orange cones, construction cones that they put in the road for traffic, and that kind of helps you remember the cones are the part of the eye that have to do with the color.
Mhm.
And so that's all taking place there in the retina. And then those signals are passed to the brain, and the brain takes all that information and makes it understandable to you. So that's the light detection part. And then that helps form the image formation. Those photoreceptors and the transmission goes up the optic nerve into the brain, and the brain puts all that information together and helps you to understand what you're actually seeing. Really fascinating. And then you had the actual visual processing, being able not only for shapes and colors and movements, but to recognize people, detection of movement and depth, specific focus. Your eye acts as that lens and it can focus in and out. And these are all very important functions. Now, there's a newer, I'll just move to the next one, but there's a newer, I don't know how many years, branch of science in the medical field. Maybe, I would think maybe in the last 10 years, maybe even less. But there's a special interest on a number of eye doctors who are learning that when they start seeing specific diseases in the eyes, it's an indication of what type of diseases and dysfunction you may get in the brain uh, years later. So they're actually finding the eyes and eye health are an early detection on what's really taking place in the brain. Because again, the eye itself is just a lens. And when you think about it, well, I would think about it this way, maybe not everybody else, but when you think about a lot of the eye diseases or a lot of things you go to an eye doctor for, only maybe half of them really have to do with the eye itself as a lens. You know, maybe your retina's something's wrong there. Maybe there's the shape of the eye is not right or something. But a lot of the actual vision part is taking place in the brain. So it's not necessarily just the eye that's the problem. Sometimes it's actually the brain because it's actually an extension of the brain. So really interesting, fascinating area of study. And who knows? I don't think that has gotten much attention or made it very far in our medical system the way it is now. But hey, big things are happening. So who knows? Maybe this is something that becomes more in the forefront of health because
So you're talking mostly about the eye of the health the health of the eye itself, not the iris, because there's the whole iridology thing with the iris that can tell you something, but you're talking about the actual health of the eye and how that reflects brain health as well?
yeah. So yeah, you just brought up a good point. So that's something else we can talk about. You know, the Bible says the eyes are the doorway to the soul. And very interesting. Well, it turns out the eyes do a lot more than that. They're actually a indication of how the brain's functioning. So yeah, there are eye doctors now who specialize on being able to uh, identify like early onsets of Parkinson's and different issues by what they're actually seeing in the eyes. It's really fascinating, and even plaque buildup. I was listening to one of the experts, and he was saying that you can get these certain patterns that form in the eye, and it will be identical to how the plaque is forming in the brain. Like when they do a scan, the image looks exactly the same as what is being projected into the eye.
Mhm.
And so when you get to iridology, and there's another one called sclerology, and I kind of specialized in sclerology. There's not a lot of people who do. A lot of people do iridology.
What
Sclerology is the white
exactly?
of the eyes,
Oh, okay.
and you get those little red lines in the white of your eyes.
Mhm,
Well, those actually tell you things. They're actually indication of how your body's functioning because those blood vessels are connected to the optic nerves, and or not just the optic nerve, but all the different nerves and muscles to the eye. So you can actually see patterns of stress forming in the eyes based on how those lines are, if they're straight or zigzaggy, or they come in and make a little hook, if they're
mhm,
really bold, or if they're, and then how far out they come to the iris tells you more. So the
mhm,
further out to the iris, the more deeper the problem is, or the longer you've had it.
mhm,
And then the iris has the same thing. There's a whole study in iridology where you can basically take the different parts of the iris in the center of the eye, and different parts of it are related to different parts of the body. The sclerology is the same thing. It's kind of like you overlay the body on top of the eyes, and then depending on where these lines are, you can say, oh, well, that line goes through the thyroid, and therefore that's showing stress with the thyroid. And sometimes, depending on the line, you can get more specific as to, oh, this is a toxic stress, this is emotional stress, nutritional stress. Can't really tell you any more than that, but It can be pretty accurate when you really get good at it. So the eyes can tell you all this interesting information
Hmm.
if you know how to do it. Now, mainstream medicine has no clue about any of that, and they probably think that's all hokey pokey. But uh, once you've seen it and you've used it with people, you realize how accurate it really is and how much it actually works.
Yeah.
But fascinating. So the other functions of the eye that people don't think about besides vision, well, some of these are kind of vision, is depth perception, right? Being able to perceive how deep or the distance you are away from something. Balance. How many people think about this one? Obviously, you have to see where you're going to know where you're going, but do you really think about how the eyes affect your body's equilibrium by providing information to the brain? And the ears do the same thing, right? The inner ear, it works with the proprioceptors. Proprioceptors. That's always such a hard word to say. Proprioception. And proprioception is really big with the ears, the eyes, and actually the alignment of your jaw. And that's one of the most sensitive proprioception in the body. It's called, sometimes it's called dental distress syndrome or faulty proprioception to the brain. There's all kinds of different dental proprioception, and that has to do with the alignment of the jaw with the top and the bottom. But they say your front teeth can tell the difference between a thickness of a human hair and a human eyelash. And that proprioception then gives information to the brain and can affect the muscles of your jaw. Well, the same way the eyes are doing the same thing, it's taking in information, and that helps your body keep its balance so you don't fall over. Um, Sometimes that's why you see in certain martial arts or fights, they'll hit the person on the two sides of the head, hit the ears, and what they're trying to do is throw off the person's balance to try to give themselves an advantage. So that's the whole purpose of that. Now, the last one here is one of my favorite subjects. It's so fascinating, and that is biophotomodulation. Big fancy word for bio is biology, photo meaning light, and then modulation being able to take information and shape it. So in biophotomodulation, we're taking different wavelengths of light that stimulate the body to actually activate or make its own chemistry. And there's companies that use this type of technology out there. Uh, I have a number of things in our clinic that we use biophotomodulation for all the time because it's a huge thing. Some people have heard of the company LifeWave with the patches, and I had a chance to work with them like 10 years ago, and it's really interesting. They make light reflection patches that reflect different wavelengths of light to stimulate your body to make its own chemistry. And what people don't realize a lot of times is your body's doing this all the time. So when light hits the eye, it's stimulating these proprioception and they're called neuroceptors and neurooptic to stimulate the body to make its own chemistry. And so serotonin, melatonin, um, light helps your body activate the vitamin A, and of course, hormone A, or I mean, hormone D is made, and
Mhm.
a lot of that, hormone D starts being made because of the light hitting the skin, but it's also regulated by what's in your eyes. And this is also something that regulates how well you do out in the sun.
Mhm.
So if you're going to be out in the sun a lot, it's actually more beneficial not to have anything covering your eyes because if you cover your eyes, you have the propensity to burn more easily because the body is receiving information through the eyes in the environment. If you remember back when we were talking about the gut health and we were talking about how as soon as you put food in your mouth, that is the first signal to your brain and to the rest of the body that, hey, you're eating something. And then it monitors what are you eating? Is it a fat? Is it a protein? Is it a carbohydrate? Okay, this is what you ate. This is what the body now needs to make to break down those foods you just ate. And that process begins as soon as the food touches your tongue in the mouth. Your body is already working, telling the digestive system what it needs to digest that food. Well, the eyes are the same way, but outside in the environment when you're in the sun. And it's telling your body what to do with all that sunlight and how the skin should be reacting and what chemistry the body should be making and what it should be doing with the light. And if you have uh, sunglasses or something covering the eyes, your body's not getting that information. So it's like a feedback. So your body is going to burn more easily because it doesn't realize how much sun it's actually getting.
That was
So
what I was gonna ask you.
yeah,
Does, wearing sunglasses make it so that you get more of a sunburn? I mean,
yeah,
is that what
that's
you're
a thing.
saying?
That
Wow.
is a thing. So not wearing sunglasses is probably better than the sunscreen with all the toxic, cancerous chemicals in it. And uh, and it's also related to how well your body's then making that serotonin and that melatonin and stuff. Um,
Yeah, because
and
we've
you
talked
don't have to
about that
be
in
out in the
previous
sun. You don't have to be in
podcasts.
the sun long, you know?
Yeah, we've talked about that in previous podcasts where the
Yeah.
light in the eyes without anything in front of it, the light getting in the eyes really does affect all of your chemistry. And hey, now that we know that it has a direct link to the brain, that's pretty important.
Yeah, I'm trying to my mind went blank. I'm trying to think of the guy who talks about uh he talks a lot about that. I can't think of his name right now, but he was a neurosurgeon. He's retired now. Uh he speaks at a lot of the Western A Price conferences, and I can't believe I can't remember his name, but he talks a lot about how the body works and how the eyes actually help make a lot of your hormones, and that's where a lot of the hormones are start first made in the eyes when you're out in the sunlight, like the serotonin and the melatonin. So really fascinating information. If I
It
think about it,
is.
we'll bring up his name, but so that's biophotomodulation. Okay, root causes. Well, some of these probably are starting to sound pretty familiar. Nutritional deficiencies occur, of course. Why? Because, well, every part of the body needs nutrients, and there's 90 essential nutrients, and there's very specific nutrients that you need for the brain and the eye, and we're going to get into that in a minute. And then there's toxins. Well, obviously, we do not want toxins building up in the brains or in the brain and the eyes because it's going to cause a lot of damage, and we do not want that. I think a lot of people are aware of this now. All the different toxins building up in the brain, things getting across the blood-brain barrier, and then affecting how the brain functions. And hopefully, if Robert Kennedy is allowed to do what he wants to do, we're going to clean up a lot of the toxins that are in the environment and what people are being exposed to, because the rate of decline in brain health and the different brain diseases are definitely in a huge incline compared to what it was, just 90 years ago. Just in the last 90 years, heck, probably just in the last 10 years, it's exponentially getting worse and worse when you're looking at Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and autism. These are things that were not common even when I was a child. I mean, you hardly had anyone who was autistic, and now it's a very common thing in most classrooms. And it's like, why is this happening? Well, nutritional deficiency, the soils are awful now, if I can find my thumb. And then, now we have toxic load. And then on top of that, you have gut health. Well, a lot of people have heard the brain gut connection. Is there really a such thing as a brain gut connection? Well, there is. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But not just the gut, as in the intestines, but hepatic. And hepatic is your liver and your gallbladder. I would throw the pancreas in there. I would throw the spleen in there. I think those are all part of the hepatic system. Stomach can be slightly. Stomach kind of crosses over both. But usually hepatic is more just liver, gallbladder, pancreas, spleen, and they're directly related to the eyes and the brain. And of course, the liver is responsible for filtering out all those toxins. And then you have EMF um, damage. And of course, the big thing with EMFs, and I think a lot of people are seeing this now, is cell phones. So Usually with me, I have a cell phone. I still use one, but it's usually not on me. It's usually on a desk. And if I do have to carry it with me, it's only in my pocket for a very short time until I get somewhere and then I'm taking it out. And then if I'm going to use it, you know, we're going to use something like, hey, these guys, good old wired headset. You don't want Bluetooth. You don't definitely want the phone up against your head because now there's more and more evidence coming out about how the EMFs um, affect the brain. So they can do the brain scans and you can see the inflammation in the brain and the heating and how much heating are you getting from a cell phone when it's up against your head all the time. And I think a lot of people have seen these studies where people who predominantly talk on the right side or on the left side, when they do get a tumor, it's on that side of the head, or sometimes it's at the breast. It used to be a lot of women used to wear or carry their phone in their bra. I never really understood that, but maybe Susan can explain this to us.
Sorry. No, I can't explain that one. Sorry.
You can't explain that. I never understood that. But that's a place that you can hold things, I guess, if you don't have pockets. And a lot of women, wherever they put that phone, that's the breast they get the tumors. So there's a huge connection between the EMFs and how they're affecting the brain. And Bluetooth are bad because Bluetooth is a super antenna and it will bring everything right into your ear. So you don't want the Bluetooth. I'm not sure about the Apple iPads or iPods. Those are newer. I've had someone bring a pair in and I tested them and the EMFs were rather low. I was very surprised, but it still has to act as an antenna. So I would still think wired is still the way to go because with the wires, you can keep your cell phone away from you. You don't have to be holding it. You can set it on a desk or something. And there's actually even a step better than this if you can still find them. And that is hollow air tube headset. And I wish I had my one here. I probably have it in one of these drawers. But what happens is usually from like you have a thing with a mic, and then from the mic all the way up to the headset will be this hollow tube. And then from here down is a normal cord, just like what we see here, that you plug into the phone. And usually it's pretty long, but the hollow tube only carries the sound waves up to the headset. And so no EMFs get to a certain part. So they're not even getting close to your head at all.
Nice.
They usually call them air tubes, and you can find them online. And that's a good way to keep your body safer with EMFs. Because when it comes to EMFs, the name of the game is how far away can you get from the device so that you're safer.
Mm-hmm.
The EMFs can only go so far. And with phones, you're getting EMFs and you're getting RF, radio frequency. And radio frequency is technically radio and microwave. So a lot of people don't realize that. The microwave and the radio waves are superimposed upon each other so that you can get enough information and get it far enough. Okay, so radio waves go really far, microwaves don't, but microwaves can carry a lot of information. So when they superimpose those, you can have a lot of information and you can go all the way across the world. So when you're being exposed to something like a cell phone, you're getting EMFs, radio, and microwave radiation. And you don't want that up against your head all the time. So the further you can be away from your phone and the less you can have it in your hand or up to your head, the better. And then just good old damage, especially sports. A lot of people get brain injuries, concussions in sports. And anytime you fall or hit your head, uh, it's trauma to the body. And then we also have scar tissue, different damages to the body with scar tissue with different places. And what happens if you get a big cut on your big toe? Is that related to your brain and eyes? I don't know. You might find out it is here in a couple seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So different injuries to your body, you might not think about it, but it could be affecting how the communication is getting to the brain and the eyes. So that's that one. Next is lifestyle improvements. So I kind of talked about the EMF one already, but how about mental stimulation? The brain is like most things in the body. It is mostly fat, which is ironic because a lot of the body is mostly muscle, and you think usually the muscles need to be moved and stimulated. But it's true about the brain too. You've heard the phrase use it or lose it. If we don't keep our minds active, they do become sluggish. And even, you think back if you went to college, all the stuff you learned in college, well, can you remember all that stuff?
Mhm.
Probably not. Probably because half the stuff you learned in college, you're not using every day. But if you had flashcards and you were going through all that stuff you learned every single day, you would probably be able to recall most of it all the time. And it's just based on what you use. Another really um, good example is a language. Anyone's ever tried to learn a language? I had to learn Hebrew and Greek when I was in seminary. And Hebrew was a lot of fun, not so much Greek. I wasn't really much of a Greek fan. And now it's like, yeah, I know stuff about Greek, but I probably can't read Greek hardly anymore. Um, I know some Greek words. I still, remember the definitions. But if you tried to sit me down and read Greek, I probably couldn't do it. Hebrew, I'm a little bit more fluent with. Still probably couldn't be an excellent reader in Hebrew. If I practiced more, I would be. But
Mhm.
that's the whole point. If you're not practicing and you're not stimulating the brain, you start losing it. So doing things that activate the brain, whether you're doing puzzles or you're, doing different activities that allow you to think, uh, what is that called? Constructive thinking. There's another word for it. Thinking outside the box. But I'll think about it in a minute. See, my brain needs some
Mhm.
thinking. So use it or lose it. Sleep. Sleep deprivation, really bad for the brain. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're going to notice right away your recall is not going to be great, and you're just not going to be sharp and quick on your feet. And a lot of that is your brain's just tired. It's like, I need some sleep to recover to be ready for the next time. So next, physical exercise. Like most health issues in life, seems like physical exercise and movement in the body is really good for most situations. And it's the same thing as you have to use it or lose it. You need to be active. You need to keep things moving. It's not just the movement that helps, because whenever you're moving, you're helping everything that moves in the body move. So all your fluids, and of course, we don't want things building up. So we want the good uh, spinal fluid going up and down the spine into the brain. And movement's going to help with things like that. But the other thing with physical exercise is the stress reduction aspect to it. So physical exercise really helps a lot of people reduce stress. And that's a major thing for brain, because we talked about how the brain has the emotional component. Well, if you have a lot of stress, um, it's going to wear on you. It's going to wear on the brain, and the brain's not going to be functioning all the time because there's different parts of the brain, right? So the emotional part is the midbrain, and then you have the prefrontal cortex. That's where we're supposed to be majority of the time. Prefrontal cortex is when we're functioning and getting things done. But when we have trauma and we have stress and we keep thinking about those things, we get stuck in midbrain, and we're stuck in the emotion and the trauma, and we're not in the prefrontal cortex, and we're not functioning or getting anything done. And you kind of just get stuck in that, you know, trapped doing nothing, or you're like freeze or frozen or fawning or fleeing, you're running away, and you're not accomplishing anything. So to help get out of those modes, we do things like exercise and stuff, help take your mind off of it, get your body shifting into function mode and prefrontal cortex. Next, limit bad foods. Well, we talked about this a couple times, haven't we?
Mhm.
So your sugar, your fried foods, too many carbs, and usually when it comes to carbs, it's really the bad stuff, right? And the oils are the same thing. Your bad seed oils, highly processed, and hopefully no one listening would be eating any of those foods, because they should be getting good quality food from Azure,
Mhm.
not consuming fake grains and fake sugars and fake foods that come in a box and you're not even really sure if it came from a plant. And that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about bad foods. You know, fast food and stuff that It probably didn't even grow on a plant.
Mm.
So cut that stuff out, especially the bad oils, because the brain and the eyes are going to be very dependent on healthy fats. Improve your detox and elimination. Why? Because we want to get the toxins out. Healing the gut. And of course, improving the hepatic system. And of course, I wrote it on there: liver, gallbladder, pancreas, and spleen. So, nutrients the brains and the eyes need. And it's really interesting. The brain and the eye, for the most part, have very similar needs when it comes to nutrients because they're so highly related. And they're basically, the eyes are an extension of the brain more than meets the eye. And so you're going to see that brain typically needs a lot of healthy fats. It does need some proteins. And if for the most part, you look at these things here, very similar to what we talked about with the skin, eggs, nuts, salmon, greens, uh, antioxidants. It also needs the greens and the berries. A little bit different here. The brain needs a lot of the vitamin B12, and you need the whole food forms. You don't want to get stuff being made from coal tar. So the synthetic B12 vitamins out there, you don't want that stuff. And a lot of times, if a person has a methylation issue, you need the methylated. Now, B12 would be um, the methylated form would be methylcobalamin.
Mhm.
Okay. And you also need choline. And that's another, it's kind of like a B vitamin cofactor. And so you need choline in the B vitamin, B12. You also need your fat soluble vitamins like the A, E, and K. And of course, obviously, the A, retinol, gets activated when you're out in the sun. So you get it from your diet, and then the body helps activate it to turn it into all of its neurotransmitter and all the different things that the body uses A for. A lot of neurotransmitters, a lot of neuroreceptors, it uses it for the helping with the getting copper bioavailable, all kinds of things that A does. It's a very long process that the body uses. Um, Copper and very little zinc. You do need some zinc, but very little zinc, more copper than anything. Most people usually, when they think zinc, they should really replace that with copper because your zinc's not going to work without copper, and copper will do just fine. You need very little zinc, and most likely you're probably getting that from your diet. I don't think as many people are zinc deficient as they think. And the problem there is, again, copper is non-reactive metal. Zinc is a highly reactive metal. So if you take too much zinc, and zinc can build up and you can get too much, but one of the big things it does is zinc will deplete your copper or deplace your copper because it's highly reactive and copper is non-reactive. So copper won't affect your zinc levels, but without copper, zinc won't work either. So more of the focus should really be on the copper. Unfortunately, that's not what you see in the medical literature. It's really hard to figure out. It's there, but you really have to read between the lines to figure out what's going on. And then you have your fatty acids, your EPAs. You need hormone D from the sun and the A activation, and then probiotics, polyphenols, fiber, a lot of things that are going to help the gut and the liver. So that's the type of nutrients you need. Now we're going to move into a unique perspective on brain health. Maybe I'll just pause here and see, do you have any questions so far?
The only thing I was going to comment on was the fact that you had salmon listed there as one of the nutrient things, as well as the antioxidants. And it's pretty neat because the astaxanthin that comes from salmon and makes it the orange color is also something that is an antioxidant. And the astaxanthin that we have in our supplement here at AzureWell, it does not come from salmon. We get it from a different source. But that I understand is really good for the eyes. And so seeing both of those things on your list, it's like, ooh, there's something to that.
Yeah, and isn't that also in the advanced eye support? Mm, I think it's one of the ingredients. No,
Maybe.
it's its own ingredient. I mean,
Mhm,
you have your own supplement just on that, but I think there's also
mhm,
some of it in the advanced eye support that we're gonna talk
mhm.
about.
Yeah, so that was the only comment that I had based on what your last slide was, but yeah, this is good.
Yeah. So now we're gonna have a very interesting thing here about copper and iron and the brain. So in the brain here in the far upper right, you see something called the locus ceruleus, and that is also in Latin called the blue spot. And that's because that's the area in the brain up here that actually contains a lot of copper, and that's why it's blue. And you can see these pathways in the brain. They drew them in green there. This is what helps deliver. It's actually in the brainstem, but it delivers the copper throughout the brain. And that they found that this part of the body is highly related to your body making neuroepinephrine, and it's highly related to look at all these clinical things: clinical depression, panic disorders, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, anxiety, um, and some medications, including the norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and others are. This is what they're believed to be actually working upon in the brain. Is this area of the brain which actually needs copper? And of course, when we're low in copper, you're going to have more of this anxiety, PTSD, HD, or ADHD, and all these type of symptoms. So, copper is usually blue in the body. This like the crystal form of copper, which is the mineral form in the ground until the plant takes it and turns it into the form that we need. And then this is how the body then takes that copper and disperses it all throughout the brain. So very interesting. A play on the blue here, and we're going to see more of this here in a second. What else? Well, copper is needed for proper nerve function, helps to heal the nerves. The body needs copper to make the myelin sheath. That's the covering of your nerves. And we've probably talked about this before. Skin and connective health, your skin color, suntans, hair color, all that is related to copper. Now, isn't that interesting? So, when your body or you, which you're in your body, is out in the nature and in the sunlight, I have to wonder if the sunlight hitting your eyes doesn't stimulate your body to release more copper so you can get that nice golden suntan. So, low copper is another reason why people burn. And we see it's directly related to the brain and the eyes. So, you have to wonder, is this how the body works? Is this the innate wisdom that the creator created into the body? So, copper also helps make you smarter, boosts mood, cognitive ability, stress, anxiety. And copper needs three types of fats that become bioavailable: the retinol, vitamin A, omega 3s from clean animals, saturated fats, including coconut oil. So, coconut oil is really interesting because it's one of the few plant oils that is actually a saturated fat. So, things like cod liver oil and grass fed beef liver and grass fed organs and meats and grass fed butter and eggs and raw milk. These are all going to be things that are really phenomenal for the brain, which is why we have our cod liver oil. And now we have our Alaskan cod liver oil. So that's really nice that Azure was able to bring us Alaskan cod liver oil because it's so much cleaner. And you really need that to get your retinol. So that last note on there, the brain lives off of fat and copper. And we're going to see this play on fat being in this green color. When you really think about it, a lot of your fats, they're the yellowish green colors. So the next one, a little word about iron. Why? Because, well, iron can build up in the brain, and we have this article here from that's 2025, magnetic resonant imaging. And this abstract was talking about iron accumulation in the brain related to all these different diseases. Isn't that interesting? Now, there's other names for this: unbound iron or inorganic iron, metallic iron, non-heme. So heme iron would be the iron that is naturally occurring in like animals and in might get from plants. And very interesting, some of the research that Morley Robbins has been doing with the RCP recently is looking at how heme iron takes a completely different pathway of metabolism in the body than non-heme. So non-heme would be like metallic iron, like iron shavings, not supposed to be in your food, not supposed to be in your grains, but they're putting them in there. Iron oxide nanoparticles, yeah, it's man-made iron shavings again. That's not the heme form of iron that you would get from plants and animals. So it seems that iron from plants and animals take a different pathway in the body than the metallic irons. And most of the iron supplements out there and IVs that you're going to get medically are going to be metallic form of iron. They're not going to be the naturally occurring heme iron. So a lot of people are now wondering if the reason why so many people function so well on a meat diet, and that's a big thing today. A lot of people are doing the meat, maybe not necessarily meat only. Some people are, but uh, a lot of people are doing very well on that diet. And a lot of people think the reason why is because you're getting heme iron from the animals, and the heme iron can maybe bypass the iron recycling system and get directly into the mitochondria and the hemoglobin. So it's not necessarily addressing the root cause because you're not fixing the iron copper recycling system, but you're bypassing it. So you're actually kind of treating the symptoms again. So it's a really interesting concept because obviously animals have a lot more heme iron than plants do. So that's one of the theories that people have on this now. So something to think about. All right, a unique perspective. So this comes out of the Aleph Tau body system, which is basically my life's work. I've spent years working on that. I've probably worked on with this system for over 20 years now. Oh yeah, 24 years
Mhm.
about. And most of my really deep research has been in the last 12 to 15 years. So it's a completely different system of energy than acupuncture or like chakras or any of these other systems. And this is a system that I identified that there were master control points and there are energy pathways like what you're seeing on the screen. And the master control points are made up of Hebrew letters. So the Hebrew letters are literally on the body. And really fascinating. And that's why it's called the Aleph Tav body system, first and last Hebrew letters. And in that system, you have 7 main cycles of the body. And a cycle is like a category that everything in the body is funneled into one of the 7 categories based on vibrational frequency. So different frequency ranges get plugged into different cycles of the body, and different parts of the body get put into different cycles of the body. So it's really an organization structure that the creator created to organize everything. And so these two pathways, which are called the blood messenger pathway and the head and vision messenger pathway, and you can see them in green, they belong to third cycle. Now, third cycle energy happens to be, because of its vibrational frequency range, happens to be related to the color green. It also happens to be directly related to your liver and your gallbladder, part of your pancreas, some of your spleen. It's directly related to the brain. So if you look on this chart and you see all those zigzags in the brain, the zigzags on these drawings illustrate that that is the parts of the body that this energy pathway actually materializes and creates. So this pathway on the right is specifically responsible for creating the brain and the eyes and a lot of the spleen and gallbladder. And the one on the left, a little bit more of the liver and the reproductive system, and some of the brain and eyes. And then you have the peripheral nerves, other things that this cycle controls as far as liquids is blood chemistry. Really interesting because your blood, when it's in your skin, kind of has a greenish bluish tint. And then when it's out in the light, it's red.
Mhm.
And you see there's a play on the opposite colors of red and green. And how that works is um, the color you see is the color. Well, the color you see is the frequency of light that is being, actually, it's not a frequency, it's a wavelength of light that's being reflected. So if you see a leaf, the reason why it looks green to you is the spectrum of light that's being reflected is the wavelength that is in the green spectrum. And that's why it looks green. So things look one way when we see it because how light reflects off of it, but it could be vibrating at a different thing. So colors affect the body differently. So green would have a positive effect on third cycle for people, or it could be too stimulating if you're hyper third cycle. If you're, underactive in third cycle, green might be good for you. But there's a difference between wearing green and looking at green.
Mhm.
See, so looking at green, you're going to get stimulated because of the green. But if you're wearing something, you're actually absorbing the frequency of what the color actually is, which could be different than the color you see. Because the color you see is only what's being reflected, the wavelength that's being reflected. So really interesting on how colors affect the body. What else is this related to? Well, nutritionally, third cycle controls fats, retinol. Isn't that interesting? As far as elimination, it controls methylation and liver detox. As far as emotions, it's the emotions of anger and frustration. So anger, frustration really affect the liver and the gallbladder. And then as far as the five senses, third cycle controls sight. Now, if you look at these pathways, you can see they're very long. The first pathway on the left begins in the big toe and comes all the way up here into the brain, where it then turns into the second pathway, which then comes all the way back down into the big toe. Really fascinating. Now, why is this important? Well, these pathways are pathways, the messenger pathways, because they're basically the broadcasting channels. So information travels through these energy pathways to get from one point to another in the body. And they're hitting Hebrew control points along the way. So just like an electrical system, if something interferes with this pathway in the big toe, like I was saying earlier, what happens if you had an injury to your big toe and you had scar tissue somewhere in the big toe where this pathway travels through? Well, that actually could cause problems in your brain and your eyes. Now, most people in the medical field would never understand that. But when you look at the chart and you realize, yeah, that pathway comes all the way up here and goes through your eyes and the brain, there's a direct correlation. And now there's also a direct correlation to how well is your liver functioning and the gallbladder functioning. If they're not functioning well and these energy pathways have to travel through there to get to your brain, guess what's going to happen? Now you can have brain and eye problems.
Mhm.
So a lot of times when a person has a problem with the brain or the eyes, I'm thinking gallbladder and liver. They need some cleansing. Maybe there's a methylation problem. Maybe there's some anger, frustration,
Mhm.
and all the emotions that, spawn off of those too,
Mhm.
right? Unforgiveness, and, there's all kinds of things you can think of.
Mhm.
So
So,
that's how that is directly related to uh, specifically the brain and eyes with third cycle. Any
so
questions?
just because you think you have brain fog doesn't mean that it's something in your brain that's causing the problem. It could be elsewhere in your body that's causing that problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The next one, fifth cycle. Imagine that. It's red. Fifth cycle, color is red. The two pathways are heart messenger pathway and sound assimilation messenger pathway. Now, if you look at the sound assimilation, that's the one on the right. That's the one that goes up through the brain too, and it comes down and comes into the ear. But look where it goes, directly into the small intestine. So, a direct correlation between the gut and the brain. This pathway is often out of balance with people with Parkinson's. You see that a lot, and other neurological conditions related. So, that's why a lot of people with Parkinson's, you will see there's a direct connection to the gut and the brain. And so, and actually, when you have a lot of fifth cycle dysfunction, one of the most common symptoms is the person becoming very stiff, rigid, and shakes and jerks. So, anytime you start developing a lot of shakes and jerking, it's usually a fifth cycle dysfunction.
Hmm.
Okay. And this will also control a lot of the facial nerves. The heart pathway is the same thing. You can see the heart pathway goes through a lot of the brain, through the eyes, into the heart, and it goes into the gut. So now here's a connection between the gut, the heart, and the brain. Starts making you really think about some certain passages in the Bible that'll talk about the emotions and the thoughts of the heart, and the it talks about emotions and thoughts of the gut or the intestines, and how that directly is related to the brain. So fifth cycle controls heart, part of the thyroid, obviously the brains, the eyes, peripheral nerves, facial nerves, small intestine, parathyroid. It's related to the bone, the thymus, and the ears. So the liquid controls is the bone marrow and some blood functions. The nutrients, iron and magnesium. Elimination system, it's the intestines. The emotions for fifth cycle are usually shame and performance. And that's usually what shame does. Shame pushes us into being a very performance-based, perfectionist-based, drive, really driven type of behavior. And shame is different than guilt. Okay, so in case people wanted to know. Difference. Guilt is when you feel guilty because you did something, right? You did something, you know it's wrong, you feel guilty. Shame is more of a attack upon you as a person. Shame isn't I did something wrong. Shame is more I'm the problem. There's something wrong with me. So shame can be a really negative emotion, and it's one of those things that is pretty predominant in America. We do a lot of different things to shame each other and shame the opposite sexes. And even though I'm not crazy about the woman, Brene Brown, uh, I'm not crazy about her religious views, but she wrote a very excellent book on this called Men, Women, and Worthiness. And all about her interviewing all kinds of different women. And then she gets into interviewing men and finding out how our society uses basically shame to shame us into different things. Really interesting book. And then sensory for fifth cycle is touch, the ability to touch and sense things. Oh, I wanted to mention one more thing back on third cycle.
Mhm.
Not everyone will pick up on this, but some people out there will. A very interesting thing about this one is it's related to blood, it's related to the fat, it's related to the liver, the gallbladder, pancreas, all these different organs. And really interesting is this pathway, when you put the two together because they work as a pair, you will notice that the pathway goes to the large big toe on the right, the large thumb on the right, and the earlobe on the right. So think about the Bible and the peace offering and some of the other offerings where the priest was supposed to take the blood and the fat, and most of that sacrifice involved the fat and the blood around the liver and the gallbladder and the pancreas, and they were supposed to take the blood and put it on the right big toe, the right big thumb, and the right earlobe. Really interesting connection there, just for uh, maybe some interest in people that ask question, why would that
Yeah.
be? And so that's fifth cycle. So now you can see a direct correlation between the gut and the brain and the heart and iron. And the last one, fourth cycle. So fourth cycle is blue in the body. The two pathways in fourth cycle is the kidney messenger pathway and the water fertility messenger pathway. Largest pathway on the back of the body is the water fertility messenger pathway. And you can see both of these pathways go up through the brain. They have a lot to do with the reproductive system. They go through the kidneys, they go through the intestines. Well, there's not many places they don't go, as you can see. So these fourth cycle controls bladder, part of the kidney or the thyroid, the brain, the nerves, the spine, the kidneys, the ears, the muscles, liquids, reproductive system, and the adrenals. It controls all fluids in the body. If it's a fluid or a muscle, you always think fourth cycle function. And so the nutrients for fourth cycle, copper, magnesium, and your electrolytes. So you think about how much is related to your adrenals and the kidneys. And of course, it comes right up through this brainstem where that locus coeruleus is, which is the blue dot, delivering all that copper to the brain. And of course, the elimination in this cycle is going to be the kidneys, the urinary system, and sweat. And the emotions for fourth cycle, fear and anxiety. Imagine that. It just happens to all work out perfectly. And so I couldn't have made this stuff up. This was years of research, and it just all comes together, and you see his fingerprints all over this stuff. And then, of course, this is the sense of hearing, which is very interesting. You can see in the water fertility messenger pathway, it kind of curves down through and comes into the ear. And what happens when we're fearful and we have a lot of anxiety? Sometimes we stop listening.
Mm.
So
So
there's a correlation to copper and
you've
all those functions.
you've outlined 3 different cycles that are directly related to the brain and the eyes. And you also talked about messenger pathways. Can you let us know again what exactly is a cycle and how is that different than a messenger pathway? Just, like a
Mhm.
101 course here on and what exactly is that?
Okay, yep. So the body has 7 cycles, and I would look at cycles as categories. So everything in the body is divided into one of the 7 cycles based on its resonating frequency. So every tissue, every organ, colors, sounds, everything gets divided into these different cycles. And the cycles are they're there to organize the body, but also to supervise everything in its own cycle. And they work as cycles. So they're always constantly cycling through 1 through 7 all the time. Whereas an energy pathway, a messenger pathway, is a pathway that actually exists in the body. It's a light energy pathway, and it's carrying or transmitting information throughout the body. So it's just like the wiring inside your house. So that's the internal wiring in the body that connects different parts of the body, and it's carrying information throughout the body through there.
Mhm.
And you're always going to have 2 messenger pathways in each of the 7 cycles.
Okay. And
So,
this is the system that you're calling the Aleph Tav body
mhm,
system.
yep.
This is the system that you've been studying for 20 or 25 years.
hmm And then all the pathways and the cycles are then controlled by the Hebrew letters that are on the body. So the body has one, well, bilateral points. That means point is on both sides of the body. Well, I can't get myself right in this camera. Talk about eyes and brains and how that throws you off if I just think about it here. So right here is your 20s, and they're bilateral, which means there's one on each side of the body. And that would be the resh in Hebrew, which is literally a picture of the head. And of
Hmm.
course, it's on the head. And you have one for every Hebrew letter, including the 5 final forms, except for the last final form, which is the final zadi. That point is not active on the body. It actually does exist, it's just not active. But that's because that is the point that represents a resurrected righteous man. And
Wow.
we do not have resurrected bodies yet. So I have some theories about that point and what's going to happen when Messiah returns. But so And those control points are literally like the telecommunication centers of the body. So
Mhm.
they're the ones that can contain all the information, and they're broadcasting that information throughout the body along the pathways, so every area of the body knows how to function correctly.
And these cycles are different than acupuncture and chakras and things like
Mhm.
that. This is a different system that you've identified.
Yep. Yeah. If you look at a lot of the chakras or the acupuncture points and pathways, they call them meridians.
Mhm.
The meridians actually stem off of these. So these flow out of the body first, and then they actually form the meridians. But when you look at a meridian, they usually do not cross the midline. You notice most of these pathways zigzag back and forth and kind of go all over the place. Most meridians only stay on one side of the body. So I see the meridians, they're something God created, but they're a lot more superficial.
Hmm.
And you can mess around with the meridians all day long, but if the problem is on one of these pathways, acupuncture is not going to touch it because this is kind of like the root and the seed of how the energy flows in the body.
Interesting.
And of course, in the Aleph Tau body system, all we're using is very light touch. So you're
Mhm.
literally using laying on of hands on two different Hebrew points because your two hands are different polarities. One's negative, one's positive. And when you
Mhm.
touch two different points, you get energy circulating just like an electrical circuit.
Mhm.
So you don't have to use any needles, you don't have to do any pressing or rubbing or any of that kind of stuff. Very, very light touch.
Wow. Okay.
All right. So now we're into basic nutrition from AzureWell supplements. So, obviously, to start with basic nutrition for the brain, you need fat and copper. And the Alaskan cod liver oil is one of the only bottles I think we have that's white, unfortunately.
Mhm.
But, when you're dealing with manufacturing, sometimes that's the best we could do. But if we can ever turn it black, we're going to get it black. But there's your cod liver oil for your healthy fats and your core copper for the copper. And there you go. There is the antioxidant for the brain support and the healthy eyes. It's also great for the mitochondria and cardio support. Another basic nutrition for brain and nerve support is the liquid B12. So we have a liquid B12. We have other B vitamin, or Azure has other B vitamins that we have talked about in other shows. But this one specifically is just the liquid B12. Really good for the brain, the eyes, for methylation, all those type of functions. And then because of stress and because how important magnesium is for the brain. And I don't know if we actually mentioned magnesium when we were going through nutrients. Magnesium is one of the basic nutrients the brain really needs. And I'm sure the eyes have some function with magnesium because there's I think, over 300 different enzyme processes that need magnesium in the body. But as far as functions, um, it's like I'm trying to remember the Magnesium Miracle book. Her research is about the best on magnesium, and I think she has something like 15,000 functions she's identified in the body requires magnesium. So we have this product here, Racing Mind Relief with magnesium, and it's M, so that's magnesium malate. So a great product to get magnesium in the body, and it has other herbals in there to help with calmness and relaxing the mind. Really great for helping you fall asleep if your mind is overactive. All right, so the next slide, we are gonna move to this one here. So now we have basic brain and eye supplement support from AzureWell. So these would be, we're past the basic nutrition part. Here are direct supplements for the brain and eyes. And of course, as you can imagine, the first one is called Advanced Eye Support. So this one is going to be really great for the eyes, retinal health, photoreception health, and visual acuity. And there's a bunch of different herbals uh, in this product that's really going to help with all those things, even the helping with the muscles of the eye. So I love that product. I have a lot of good results from people who have tried that product, and they report back that their vision is clearer and things are just improving. So
It's
great
good
product.
to hear. Yeah, nice.
Yes. Then we have one called Nerve Support. So nerve support, there's some mushrooms in there, and there's the fossil. Uh, man, I'm getting my tongue ties tonight. Once you say it wrong the first time, it's so hard to say it again. Phospholipases, really important for the brain. This one also helps calm the neurotransmitters for neural energy support, which is the optic nerve, as well as integrity of the nerves. So uh, I think I've had not a lot of people have tested to use this product, but there have been a few. I can think of 2 or 3 people, and they have noticed a significant difference when they started that product. So I've had experience with both of these now, with people actually testing for them and using them, and they're doing well. And brain support and quick and bright thinking support, we've had a lot of feedback on those two.
Mhm.
But the brain support is very specific for the brain, for the lipid membrane support. This is one of the ones that has the brain function support with the alpha GP, GPC, which helps with the learning and the memory and the retention, recall, because a lot of times that's the issue, is it's up there, we just can't get it out. So the brain support. So brain fog, anything like that, brain support would be a very good one to do. Now, the quick and bright thinking support, a little bit different. It does help memory, but this is more cognitive, learning, attention. And this is the one that has the brain derived neurotropic factors, which is a big thing people are talking about today. Really helps the cognitive function of the brain and brain health. So this one would be more for the person who wants to have that quick edge, faster recall, and just be, have that sharpness and to their thinking. So those in school
Mhm.
or exams or some maybe I should be taking it before I speak. Do these audio recordings or video recordings. See, I definitely need it, and then my
Mhm.
would be more sharp and clearer. But that would be more of the quick and bright thinking support, as opposed to the brain support is more overall brain function and memory recall and brain fog and things like that.
Mhm.
And then one more, I think. So let's see if that there it goes. Basic. Nope, that went backwards. There it goes. You're gonna have to love computers. So since we talked so much about digestion and hepatic support, um, in the basic nutrition support, we gave you a little bit of fourth and third cycle support with the copper and the fats. But here's some more support with fifth cycle and third cycle, helping the liver, gallbladder, and the gut work better. So there's 2 really phenomenal products for liver, gallbladder. Actually, there's a bunch that we have, but specifically, these 2 are almost the same. The only difference is one is liquid, one is capsule. There's a little bit more herbal support in the capsule form versus the liquid support form, but they're almost identical products. So the liquid one is going to be more bioavailable because it's liquid. So it's going to be a little bit more rapid getting in there. So that's one way to go. If you want something faster, go with the liquid. Now, these are both phenomenal products. They're really designed for the bile and the gallbladder, but they have phenomenal liver support also. And they're also specifically designed to help with the fat metabolism. So if you need help breaking down your fats with fatty meals, a lot of that has to do with the bile and the gallbladder. And if you're missing a gallbladder, because it's been removed. These are products that you probably really need because your body needs that extra support, because your body, technically, it's the liver that makes the bile and the gallbladder just holds it. So your body can still make bile, but you're a little hindered because the gallbladder is not there. And then you also want to think about those energy pathways. There could be scar tissue there because they took the gallbladder out, and that could be interfering with something. So working on those pathways will help getting the energy circulating back through the scar tissue.
Mhm.
But a product like this to help you break down your fats is really going to be key. And then it's also going to help with detoxing. The one next to it, again, kind of similar. Two different products that are basically almost the same product. One's capsule, one's liquid. The liquid's going to be a little bit more bioavailable, but I think there's a couple more herbals found in the capsules than you can actually get into the liquid. Just the way blends work and how long they can last in liquids opposed to a capsulated form. So a little bit for everybody. It depends on you if you want it fast, and a lot of times it depends on the taste too. Some people don't care for the taste of liquids. Some people don't care about the taste and they just want what's fastest. But these are more designed for the actual liver support, detox support, healthy hepatic support. So if you're wanting to get the detox and the liver really functioning, this is a key product, the liver support extended and the liver Cure Now product. And then, of course, the last one I threw on there, just because of that unbound iron, you don't want to forget about your IP6 with inositol to get that iron out. So that is the products that AzureWell has that would be helpful for you with your brain and eye health.
Well, thank you for telling us about that, and thank you for introducing us to the Alphonso body system.
Yeah,
Even though, we you introduced us to 3 of the cycles, but this is really a new concept. It's a new concept, so you'll have to probably tell us a little bit more about that as we go along, because that's very new. But the
yeah,
other things that I learned from this is, hey, the brain runs on fat, but hey, you've got to be able to metabolize that fat. And that's the reason why, hey, the liver gallbladder thing is so important. You've got to have copper. The whole body is involved in making your brain and eyes healthy.
yep,
There's a lot to it. It's not super simple, but the more you get your entire body healed and doing better, your brain will do better as well. So,
yeah. The innate wisdom knows what to do. We just need to give it what it needs.
Yep. Fearfully and wonderfully made. And
That's
when
right.
you get into that really deep, it's like there is a lot of amazing stuff the body does that, as you said in the very first slide, I think there's stuff that your brain takes care of for you that you don't even know it's doing. And it just does it automatically so that you can go about your day and enjoy what you're doing.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
amazing.
right.
Well, thank you, Dr. Monzo. And if
Thank you for
anyone
having me.
wants to hear more about Dr. Monzo, he has a website, drmonzo.com. So drmonzo.com. And well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.